Right, so I'm Paul. I work for a little company called Flux. Are you sure you want to sit closer? Some of the type's a bit small now. A bit small. And before I start, I need to do this bit. I've made it very big so you can read it from the back. But unfortunately, I'll just give you the 30-second pitch on what we do, which unfortunately I have to do, but otherwise I've got no credibility to be here and you won't listen. So I'll do that as quickly as possible. So Flux is a product and service innovation company. We basically help mostly big companies basically do new products of various kinds, mostly digital. We don't do any design or development. So you're going to ask what the hell I know about Agile. I'll tell you that in a minute. Anyone work for any of these companies? No, good, right, we can say what we want, that's good. But we use essentially lean techniques to help clients work out what they should be delivering and doing in big software delivery projects. So we do things with people like Argos, who ask the question, like, we've got all this technology in our stores, how can we use that to differentiate our service at point of delivery? So like, sometimes they're not digital at all. And we do quite nutty stuff, people like More Than Insurance, where we're tasked with running what they call a smart insurance R&D lab. And the job there is to see if you can use technology to kind of turn insurance around and create actual things that people value rather than insurance policies which they hate. And that's actually a dog service. Anyone have a dog in the room? No? Okay, right. But the proposition there is that actually we'll deliver you a load of stuff every month that you will need for your dog, make it very convenient. That's worth paying for, and by the way, it comes with insurance. So it's kind of doing those kind of things. So what do I know about Agile? Well, we are involved in some big Agile projects. Our role is product development, which means essentially working out what needs to be done and then helping that team deliver it. So we're doing that at Lloyd's, for example, at the moment. But I spent most of my working life in a big digital agency basically started the user-centered design team, built that up. It was very good in the end, according to Forrester. You don't have to believe me. And sometime around the middle of that time, two of our developers read a book, and the book was Agile Software Development with Scrum by Ken Schwaber. Anyone read that book? Or is that so out of date now? Is that true? No, fine. Okay. And the good news was the company kind of embraced it very wholesale. Pretty much no one else in the UK was doing it at the time, or not talking about it anyway. And we did stuff like we flew Ken Schwaber over to come and do Scrum Master training in the UK. So I spent a lot of my life dealing with some of the knottier issues around how to make Scrum work, particularly with a focus on design and customer in that, or user. So there we go, that's my creds. Right, is that right? Is that enough? Right, good, enough of that. So you may or may not be familiar with the term customer activities. That's what Ken called the kind of stuff that a customer has to do before they're ready to start Sprint Zero in an Agile project. Does that term ring any bells? Do you use that anymore? No. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, really. And if I were to look at the end of this session and you walking away and giving amazing feedback, which I'm sure you will, what will you have learnt? Well, if you're in Agile design and delivery teams, I think it's about how to encourage better business briefs that enable your team to do more and better, and engage and promote kind of more harmonious relationship with the leadership. Business leaders, if you're involved in actually doing that kind of briefing in the first place, this is hopefully about how to get your teams closer to the project, the end goal, the end product that you've imagined and that you believe that you want them to deliver, and again, more harmony with that team. And if you come from a product design background, so you've studied how to make things, or you've done software, package software, what have you, you will probably be thinking, why the hell are we talking about this? This is just the way I do things normally. And you're kind of right, because this is something that's been going on a long time in a number of disciplines, but hasn't really kind of completely transferred into software development. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So I believe there are two types of organisations in the world. Here's a brilliant pie chart to illustrate there's two different types of organisations. Which I think there's actually one type of organisation, that's a commercial organisation of course, and that they develop, design and sell products, and every single company does this. So whether you are an obvious one, where you literally make a projector or a phone or something, that's very obvious, but even if you're a firm of solicitors or lawyers, you have a product. It's the service you deliver, it's the tools that support that service, it's the way you sell it, it's the offices, it's the whole thing. That is the product. So every company is a product company essentially. But they fall into two groups, those that behave like product companies and those that don't. Does that seem fair? No? Okay, I'll explain what I mean. So if I walk into Selfridges and talk about product, what they mean by products in their vocabulary is the stuff that sits on the shelf that customers buy. Okay? Yet that's not the product. The product to Selfridges, when you talk to Chinese tourists stood outside, queuing outside on a Saturday morning, is the whole retail theatre, it's service, it's the beautiful stuff that sits inside the store, and it's the products on the shelves. That whole thing together is the Selfridges product. And actually that extends to online as well. And it's very different from the perception that a product company has. So a very obvious one to pick on would be Apple, and you look at someone like Johnny Ive, Sir Johnny Ive, sorry, who is a product designer by background, comes from that kind of world, and oh, sorry, I don't know how that got in there. That's so embarrassing. I do apologise. Anyway, but if you look at product development and how it relates to delivery, then it kind of breaks down into these stages. So it's all about what's the company strategy, what ideas and insight that we have around that. Let's kind of test some of those things, work some of the details out. Hopefully, what comes out of that, some validation, some developed things that kind of make sense. And then we need to work out who's going to deliver it, how, and then get into delivery. Now, the problematic thing about most companies is they don't actually do it like that. They think in a different way. So they kind of have this sort of secret stage where a very small group of leadership sit around and work out what they think is the right thing to do. They make a business case and they make an investment decision. And then someone has to deliver it. So who's been tasked with delivering something of that kind? No one. Oh, good. Right, thank God for that. So I think actually, and you'll probably bear this out, is that my view of what sits inside that box is that it's nothing but opinions, guesswork and speculation. From a very small group of people, yes, they might have vast experience, but ultimately business cases are entirely fictional. They're made up on someone's ability to predict the future, which they may or may not be able to do very well. So fortunately for my experience in these kind of projects is that they've tended to start actually at a slightly different place. Even though we inherit all that, it starts with a consideration of users. So users sit at the heart of a user-centered design process, and that's well integrated into Agile now. Now, unfortunately, they sort of go one of two directions. So if you start a big project, it's entirely new, the first thing you might do is sit down and say, what if? And then explore quite a lot of things. Blue sky thinking, new ideas, what opportunities might there be? Could we entirely disrupt the industry? Could we do this different from every way it's ever been done before? And the way that feels is it's exciting, it's interesting, it's innovative, it's creative, and it's a good kind of environment, right? The other way it might go is the opposite, that which is you inherit the backlog. So here is a backlog. Well, they just seem to have made up their minds what they're going to do. What do they need us for? Well, let's just punch some code and draw some wireframes and we're done, right? And that's very demotivating. It's detailed, it's monotonous, it's boring, right? And it's kind of completely counter to the way one of the kind of big reasons Agile was kind of really designed in the first place. Now, to bring the life to the difference between product company and non-product company, I'll try and do this. So what if a company that's inherently a product company and thinks like that and does things like that behaved differently, behaved like we do in software development quite often? So I'm going to ask you to put yourselves in the shoes of a product designer. We're going to design a piece of luggage. We're not going to actually do this, don't worry, I'm not going to make you do 2 bits of paper. But let's say that our brief is from the board. They said, we want you to design and deliver and manufacture a new piece of luggage specifically for the family market. The whole board's really behind this, they're really excited. We've got the budget set already, and off you go, right? So where would we start? Well, we'd start with research. And research might have consideration of families when they're travelling, what their particular difficulties are. We might look at luggage that's inherited from generation to generation because it's been around the world and it's got stickers all over it and there's some kind of story attached to it. We might look at kids riding on cases and think, I wonder if there's something in that. We might look at how luggage seems to be, or suitcases particularly associated with kind of key life stage events, so leaving home, going to university, going on holiday, things that are memorable. We might kind of consider all those things as background. And the next thing we'll do is start thinking about what could this be? Well, how could it be different? How could it be better? And this might get a little bit crazy. We might divert a little bit from the brief. We might start looking at, I'll tell you what, we could create an extra revenue stream if we sold stuff to go in suitcases. So what if you could buy it and already had your travel kit and your earplugs and your anti-noise headphones and a game and what have you? We could look at stuff like that. It might get even crazier still, we might divert completely from the entire brief and say, well, I'll tell you what, let's not make it for that particular audience because there's not enough money in it. What if we made things especially for bikes or for developers or whatever, and it was entirely specialist around that particular need set? We can make loads of money. We might get it slightly more crazy. What if the suitcase became the mode of transport? Forget that whole, carrying stuff. Let's just actually go on the thing in the first place. And if you've got a creative director in the room, have we got any creative directors in the room? No, good, right, it gets even crazier. So what if the suitcase actually became the holiday, right? And this is actually an art installation that somebody's seen, and it's got like a little hatch from a boat and the teak decking, and it plays sounds of the sea, and there's and it could be an experience in itself. Don't even need to go on holiday. Now at that point, probably a program manager steps in and says, hang on a minute, can we just, brings the guillotine down, chops everything off, says, can we just deliver something and get on with this, because ultimately we've got a brief to deliver, and all that radical thinking, no matter how good it was, kind of gets parked because no one buys it. So they don't necessarily believe it, some do, some don't, but no one can prove whether those are the right things to do or not. So what typically happens is, you kind of have this kind of convergence of things that we know we can do, we've probably done them before, and things we know our customers value, and therefore is valuable to the business. And that's the stuff we do, right? That's wave 1, version 1.0, whatever. The unproven ideas sit down there, and they could be brilliant. And odds on, a year after you've delivered this thing, someone comes to market with one of the things that sat in there, and you go, do you know what, we thought of that. Has that ever happened to anyone in this room? It definitely has to me, right? But anyway, so those things get kind of sidelined, and we end up in this scenario, instead of designing something brilliant, we end up designing something that's good. It's a good product in market, it does what it's supposed to do, it does what most of the other things in its marketplace do. It's suitable for a family. It's not differentiated, it's not mind-blowing, it's not something we're necessarily proud of to that degree. So, the shame of this is that we've got really good people in our teams. They're creative, they've got energy, enthusiasm, and they want to do good things. And we lost them quite early on in this process. Because the line that gets sort of trodden is that you start off up here, anything's possible, we're all happy. And then suddenly you kind of move down into the trough of despair where, yeah, right, well, let's just park all the good stuff and we'll just do this then. And then ultimately over time you start to lift up again as you start delivering something you're proud of. It's good code, it's good design, it does what users are happy with it. Actually, yeah, we've done a good job, and the pride kind of creeps back up. So this is the kind of the line that we kind of follow today. And we might have had the right ideas, so we might have had some of these ideas, and they might be the right ones, but we didn't have time to get those ideas right. So have you seen this product? This is Trunky. So it's a little ride-along suitcase, kids ride-along. Very, very successful, right? But we haven't had the chance to get from crazy arse insight and ideas to something that actually makes commercial sense and customers really value. So what we needed to start that process off was not the brief we got, not the budget we got. What we needed was something slightly different, which was a kind of good summary of that research and insight. Here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's something that we want to achieve. So a suitcase that children and parents will love. We know that hassle parents and kids will love a ride-on case. It will save tired parents' arms and it will save tired toddlers' legs. Now get on and design something amazing, right? Now that's a good brief to start off with. And through the process of then learning that, we'll learn what's more about what's right, what's wrong. And that's product development, is that process that then happens to get you to that point where a team's ready to go. They know what needs to be achieved, what's been learned, what's not been learned, and what the kind of motivations are. So, those customer activities that happen prior to Sprint Zero should be agile in themselves, they should be user-centered, and they should be lean. And they're all about establishing truths on which we can base the next bit. Okay, make sense so far? Yes, Paul, thank you. So one of the challenges though is that sometimes this is done not so well. So sometimes product development teams kind of think, actually, we're the ones designing this, and before you know it, you end up with a waterfall project where something seems to be fully fleshed out, it's got a UI, it works, it's got functionality, it's got features, but actually that process wasn't about designing a product, it was about working out what the right product is, and sometimes people miss that. Now I've been on both sides of this fence, I've been on the receiving end and I'm now on the giving end, so I try to do that better, but I have heard words that have struck terror into my heart. We've developed a new idea, and the branding agency have done some mock-ups, brilliant, that'll give us a great start. We've had a design consultancy working on this for 6 months. Great, okay. The CEO had a designer mock something up. That actually was the starting point for the overhaul of a major retail chain's website in the UK, believe it or not. And the response might be Muppets, that's my view anyway. But we often inherit these kind of sort of magical stuff that's done in isolation without any real consideration. And that's not what product development is. That's just ideas and envisioning and imagining and stuff that we often do at the beginning of projects anyway. Now, if you get on the wrong side of that line, things can become very difficult, because if a product development team or a business owner starts the project badly, then we're going to always be questioning them from that point onwards, and that's not good. So if that's the line we follow today, the idea would be to kind of bring that line up to the point where a team starts off and says, do you know what, this could be really good. I really like that idea. I see what you've done. I understand what you've learned. I know as much as you do now. Let's get on and do something amazing. So there are two key questions, I guess. One is how you do this cost effectively, because already, you know, most delivery teams I've met anyway never seem to have the luxury of time or resource or endless money. So, you know, how do you kind of fit that in, or how do you make that worth investing in? And the second one is how do you ensure that product development doesn't ride roughshod over the Agile principles, essentially, and allows those teams to actually do the right job of designing and developing as they go. So there's three answers to two questions. One, focus on generating facts, not opinions. Do it quickly. Enable and equip the design team, don't tell them what to do. And third is don't be precious about your ideas or being right. Okay? Anyone worked out my new numbering system? It's one direction, it's two unlimited, and Funboy 3. No, before your time. Anyway, right. So if you think about this idea of facts, not opinions, and that's what we want to get to, then the process we talk about is a labs process. It's an investigative, exploratory, experimentation process about determining what's right, what's wrong. I'll show you a little clip, which of course doesn't have any sound on it, Okay, what you're about to see is a soundless clip of Richard and Judy talking to Rob Law, who is the inventor of Trunky. Now he's in Dragon's Den, and Theo Features pulls off a catch, kind of tugs his product, breaks it. Deborah Meaden says, you haven't got a product here, no one will buy this, no one will value it. Peter Jones says, it's good this, isn't it? It's like sign language or something. He says, you know, I could make that in a month. You give me that design, I will make that better than that, to a higher degree of quality. And then the rest of the dragons just go, you haven't got a business here, your business is worthless, etc., right? Now, at the end of this clip, then Richard Thingamajig, off of Good Morning, whatever it is, asks him the question, how did you feel? Because, I mean, did you just sit there and just go, but I know I'm right. I know I'm right. And then he said, yes, I did know I was right. And the question then is, how did he know he was right about that product when all those dragons who've made multi-millions were sitting there in their expert opinion saying, no, you're wrong? Well, the reason he knew is he'd already generated facts. Because what he had done, he'd had a horrendous process of getting it. It took him many, many years to make this case a reality. The first time he tried it, he licensed it to a company who then liquidated. The factory he found to make it went bankrupt. All sorts of stuff happened. He had the dodgy catches that Theo managed to pull off. It all went wrong. But once he got a product, he gave it to the press, said, try it with your families, and then write about it. And they did, and then people started buying it. Simple as that. So by the time he walked into Dragon's Den, people had started buying his product. So he already knew what the real reaction was. It didn't matter what the expert said. And how many times have you sat in a stakeholder meeting or a board meeting where someone said, I think that's the wrong thing to do? How do I take your word for it? Are you the customer? What do we do? So what do we do? Actually, I like to think if Peter Jones had made that product, he would have ended up with this thing. But anyway. So the role of the lab is to answer that question. It's to generate evidence, to kind of give us the right ideas, and get those ideas to the place where we understand them properly, and that the Agile team has something later on to use to make good decisions through that process. Right, I'm going to try validating an idea now. Are you okay for being guinea pigs? Yeah, okay. So I'm actually going to test something with you. It's a business idea I've had. I like to think of myself as an entrepreneur. And your views are going to determine whether we carry on with this as a project or not, all right? Is that okay? My life is in your hands. You are the dragons. Right, so I was inspired by this picture here, which is a guy having his photograph taken in front of his new car by his mum. And several months later, he was looking on Google Earth, and he saw that exact same scene captured from a satellite. Right? And he went, oh man, that's quite cool. Now, I took that idea and thought there's a business in here somewhere, right? What if, in fact, I'm going to introduce you to SatPic. SatPic is high-resolution satellite images on demand. So it's you, but from space. Okay, like that? I'll tell you how it will work, because you're probably thinking that's not going to work. So we've worked this out already. I've got a designer to work something up. So you have an app, and you book your slot, and this is one of those orbiting satellites, so it does low pass, all that sort of stuff. So we need to know when it's coming, where it's coming from, so we're facing in the right direction. I get all my mates out, and maybe it's the last day at school, and we all go out on the playing field and kind of make a big shape, or maybe it's for our office Christmas card and get everyone out of the building and they make a big logo of, something like that, right? Does that sound cool? And then what the thing does, it counts down, points you in the right direction, uses the accelerometer on the phone, does a little countdown, smile, gives a little shutter sound when it takes the picture. Is that right? Okay, right. If I could pull that off, I did business case, sorry, it's big business case. Take about 2 years to profit, about 5 million investment. It doesn't take as much money to get into space these days as it used to. So that's good. So basically, I'm interested to know if you think that would be cool. Would that be a good thing? Who's interested in that? If that was available, would that be interesting? George is nodding. Anyone else? Hands? Depends on the cost, okay. But generally speaking, would that be interesting? Yeah? Yes? Hands, come on. Right, at least, right, come on. There you go. Of course it would be cool, right? So the great news for you guys is we've already done this. It actually works today. So we have a limited coverage beta. Here's the app exactly as it was in those mock-ups. There's the little countdown, so now there's the shutter sound. It's only in the App Store. It's not on Android yet. We got the press to look at it. So the Guardian ran a piece on it, homemade satellites and stuff like that. And Rory Kethlen-Jones from BBC he coined this phrase, your new Spacebook profile pic, which I thought was quite nice. So that's another business line for us. And I'll show you the first consumer test we did. So this is Matt. He works over on near the O2 in Ravensbourne College. He kindly agreed to kind of do the first consumer test. So this is the little snippet he made. So we had these little stories. This is all fake at the beginning, it's just kind of to set the scene. But the idea is that they're shareable and you can kind of send them round. Our satellite kicks in a second. I think it's this view here. Yeah, here we go. Now, if you just look really carefully in here, you see that little red dot, and that's Matt. All right, so from space. How cool is that? Now that's the beta. So the alpha has a bit more resolution, and you won't be able to see it from there. But he's written on the ground in chalk, "Hello, Satpic." And he then subsequently got chased off by security from the O2, right? But there you go, it works, right? So, and to answer your question, £250. Okay, now that's limited time offer. I'm going to ask you now, so who would like to actually buy a Satpic? No one. Right, good, because it doesn't exist actually, because that was just a test. I'm sorry to pull the wool over your eyes, right? But we have one core hypothesis on which that entire business case stood, which was that people would value that service enough to pay that much money for it. And if that wasn't true, there's no point even considering how to get satellites into space and all that kind of jazz, right? Now, I do know how to do that, because the cheapest available satellite kit is about $6,000. Launching it's another matter. But anyway, so the point is that's an experiment. It's what in lean world that Eric Ries might call a minimum viable product. So the minimum thing we can do to test the hypothesis. Now that took about a day of work, right? So me and a designer have the idea, work it out, what would it be like, put some mock-ups together, me present it in a theatrical way and lie to you, and convince you, right? So, and the way you behave to start with, most of you are quite willing to put your hands up when it wasn't real, but you definitely weren't when you thought he's going to ask me for £250, right? So, anyway. So this also, however, works for big companies, right? And we do this for, this was a financial services institution who had a really kind of thorny problem they were struggling with, which was basically if we can use customers' personal data, and this is actually about how they spend their money and what they spend it on, and we could analyse it, we could potentially do really interesting things that they would value. Right? So who thinks that's an okay idea? Right? No? Bit of nodding, shaking, a few mixed opinions. Okay, they were pretty split down the middle, right? So there were 187 ideas that sat behind this being true. If it was true, there were 187 things they could do to kind of generate value from it. But equally, people might love it or they might go nuts and call the data mail, right? So this is the split. So we created an experiment, and the experiment took about a week to make. It was a bit of digital stuff. It sat inside a secure site that people were logged into. And before it was put live, they usability tested it, which is fine. What they also did when they usability tested it was they asked people what they thought of it. And their reaction was pretty similar to yours. It absolutely bombed. So 76% of people said either I wouldn't do that, or they were absolutely mad as hell that this was even being suggested. How dare you dip into my, how could you do that? That's awful. So like any responsible company regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, we did exactly what you'd expect us to do, which is we put it live anyway. Because the point was to see how people actually reacted, not what they told us they were going to react. So when we did put it live and people saw it in the context of them, it was their decision, it was an actual decision to be made, 96% of people just did it without thinking about it and nobody complained. And we had all the kind of risk mitigation stuff in case they did go nuts, right? So the worst thing that would have happened is if we got a complaint in the first 50, it would have just been turned off. So, but there's no substitute for knowing how people will actually behave versus what they say they'll do. And your reaction to that first thing was basically governed by the fact that I was asking you the question, what do you think? You know, what I'm testing it here, because when you thought it was real, you behaved differently, right? And the price was too high. Anyway, the other kind of interesting thing that quick experimentation before you get started will help you do is change direction. Because no matter how good an Agile team is or how pure they are about the Agile principles, it's very difficult to put something live, to deploy something, to put it into a build, and then say, do you know what, that's completely the wrong thing to do, let's just do something entirely different. I mean, you'll probably disagree with it, but it almost never happens, right? Yet, the pivot is critical in any business that's starting up from scratch or any kind of new project, entirely new initiative. So the pivot, again, is another lean term, comes out of the Eric Ries Lean Startup book. But it's all about acknowledging that it might be time to change something, essentially something quite big. Does anyone recognise this molecular structure? No? No biochemists in the room? Or biophysicists? No? Okay. So this was an experimental drug. It was a vasodilator. It was intended to be used for things like heart conditions and stuff like that. And they like any any drugs company does, they put it into clinical trials. And in clinical trials, you measure what are called adverse events, so side effects, right? And this is the graph of adverse events. What you're seeing is the dosage going up. And at the high dosage, there's this sort of side effect here that gets sort of starts going up, right? I'm not even going to say it out loud. You can read it, right? So we've got headaches and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom one, they thought, oh, do you know what? This is going to be a bit of a nightmare. Because we can't have 65, 70-year-old men running around hospital wards with this particular side effect, right? It would raise too many issues. See what I mean? So at that point, this whole project was about to shut down. This drug was a failure. Except somebody said, do you know what? We could actually use it just for that purpose, right? So this was born, and this is a blue pill. I've never seen one before in my life, and neither of you probably. So that is Viagra. It's the single most successful commercial drug on the market ever, right? And if someone hadn't had the ability to go, tell you what, that's not the thing, this is the thing, and pivot and change the direction of that product, in progress, at quite a late stage, that drug would never come to market. So that's what this process is all about. It's starting off with kind of high-level insights and ideas, and then pushing this very rigorous process of testing and analysing and experimenting in tiny little ways, so that quite quickly you get something that you know is true, or at least is going to be validated along the way. So let's imagine we now get into Sprint Zero. We've got a lovely fresh team of people eager and ready to hear about their new project, and we need to brief you, right? So how do we get you to the point where you say, yeah, this will be good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this project. It'll be great. Well, the first thing is we always say, tell it, don't sell it. We're not trying to sell you on this. This isn't a fiction. We haven't made something up. We're not into fictional business cases. This is about us saying, okay, 2 months ago, we had this idea. We tried that. That didn't work. We tried this. This is the evidence it generated. What we saw was when people actually interacted with it, this many people started and that many people came through. We've got proper numbers that sit behind us. We tell that story and we don't hide anything. So even if there's bits we don't know about, we don't pretend we do. Oh yeah, that'll be fine. It's like, no, this is a problem that will need to be solved in this process. That's the way we tell it. Now, if we do that and we are descriptive, not prescriptive, so we say, this is what I understand we understand it should be like. We're not saying how it should be built, how it should be designed. This is about what it should do for the end customer. We're not even defining, if you put user interface designs in here, this is a failed process, right? Because what we want to enable people to do is design the right thing. So get the idea right. So useful artifacts, things that you would expect to have at this stage, would be some kind of high-level draft persona. So this is what we believe the customer to be like based on our current knowledge and insight and what we've learned along the way. Quite often we do these kind of vision stories. So the vision story will be, it's not a design, so it's telling a story in the same way a cartoon strip would about what the future looks like when this product is working, when this thing's in place and how will we use it. So we all sketch UI, we never wireframe it properly, we never kind of make it look real. And also product and experience principles. So very high level guidance that says, how do I know when I've designed the right thing or I've picked the right feature? Well, it should conform to these principles. It should fit into this kind of category. So a simple example of that would be, so you might have a statement like this that's kind of defining a feature. So we sort of, we want to encourage serendipity. So stumbling across something that I wasn't looking for, but actually I think, oh, that's quite good. And some things, so we want, whatever the discovery mechanism is, we want it to have a kind of fuzzy edge, so people don't quite, they don't have to just type something in and get exact matches or zero results. And the other way so that's a good way to describe it. A bad way to describe it would be make it like Pinterest, right? Which is where we got the idea from in the first place. Now that would have been where the idea came from, but we get people away from that, so no, okay, like that, but not that, right? Which is a brilliant way to brief anyone, obviously not. Funboy 3 back again. So business, finally, how do you kind of get that balance right between arrogance and kind of humility of, I'm a business owner, I know what I'm talking about, but ultimately you have to make the decision. So we should not be precious as a business team about being right. We should be very happy to be wrong. We should always share our failures. And by the way, we're going to end quite soon, so questions, think of them now, right? Or discussions, whatever you want to have. So when you're telling that story, we need to tell everyone about the accidents we had along the way, right? So when we ran into that sign, we stopped because we knew that was going to lead to disaster. We had several other car crashes along the way. Because the point about experiments is they never fail or succeed, they just have an outcome. And there's no harm in sharing, you might not want to share failures, but there's no harm in sharing outcomes, right? So that's all good. So product development should be that early stage for a big, hairy project that you've never done before or never done anything similar to. It should be a process that happens up front. But again, it's more of a state of mind. But it also is a function that continues all the way through the Agile development process or method. Because for new features, you can essentially sort of send things off into a spike around product development. So looking at the backlog, thinking about what we're going to do next, that I don't understand well enough, team don't buy into it enough. Can you go away and do that experimentation, do that exploration, see if it's worth us doing, basically. That's kind of what that process is for. So at Lloyd's, for example, that's exactly what we do. We kind of started off, and now the Agile team's up and running. We're taking little kind of questions from that team, running them through that process, and dropping them back into the backlog. It's kind of validated or not validated or changed, basically. So that's really dull. So this is about playing to each other's strengths. It's about making sure, because it's very tempting to say, no one involved me in this process. And sometimes, actually, maybe it's better if someone else does it, as long as it's handed over correctly and I've got my chance to put my input and knowledge and experience into it, maybe that's okay. So I no longer try to design UI. I no longer try to run Agile teams. But I do kind of take ownership of some of those kind of things at that level. And that was all I was going to say, really. And say thanks for listening. And then we can do questions and stuff. So anyone any thoughts, questions? You've not been what they call a high reacting audience so far, but that's okay. You can warm up. No, you're quite warm already, aren't you? Does that make sense? Does that resonate with anyone? There's a thumbs up. That's not a good start for discussion, but we could build on it.